Howdy, and welcome to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Nord, where we cover a mix of current events, politics, and the law. Take it away, Warren.
Welcome back to White Hat Law. I'm Warren Nord, and I practice law in downtown Arlington. But today we're in lovely Fort Worth, and we have with us Wes Parks. It's Parks, right? Yes.
Parks, yes.
Today we have with us Wes Parks, and Wes is a psychotherapist.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking about social media defamation. As we all know, the internet can be a scary place. You can say whatever you want about anybody, and nothing bad happens to the person who's talking immediately. You don't get hit in the face, and you don't lose your job immediately. Some people walk off of an airplane every once in a while and find out that they've been unemployed. But generally speaking, you can say a lot of things about a lot of people all over the world, and you don't pay a heavy price. Wes, tell us a little bit about your background and how you're connected to this kind of thing.
Sure. I am a psychotherapist in private practice here in just outside of downtown Fort Worth. And years and years and years ago, before I went into therapy, I really thought I wanted to be like this Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. So I studied communication and journalism, studied a lot of common law, where we had to learn a lot about libel and slander and defamation. And I still hear that common law professor in my head sometimes, and it just brings back like nails on the chalkboard kind of memory. But a lot of times where I'm involved in social media is the way it affects clients, the way it affects people, the way it affects society as a whole. Because like you said, Warren, you can say just about anything and get away with it immediately, but what happens after that?
Right.
And that's what really fascinates me in the psychology field.
Well, of course, there's some famous issues where people have said things and then later they've found out that they've paid the price. There was somebody brought up this morning about the Wendy's example where they said they found a thumb. Wendy's went through all this work to try to resolve this, and later they find out that no, that just made that up. Sorry about that. Right. Damage to you.
Right.
How have you found that this impacts people in the real world with their businesses?
You know, I was actually just reading a thing this morning as I was getting ready for your show where one of my colleagues was posting on one of our professional forums about Yelp reviews. And what can you do when people are posting negative Yelp reviews about you? Because depending on the profession, you actually don't have the opportunity to really defend yourself. If somebody posts a negative review about me, my options are very limited for how I defend myself and how I respond. But between Yelp and Google Plus and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, it is a world run amok with the ability to just trash other people without immediate consequences.
Well, what I have learned, because we've all had this to some degree, if you are in the world doing business as a personal service provider, somebody's going to be dissatisfied with something. And there are some situations are harder to fix than others. If a legitimate, I'll just say this, that everybody I've worked with, if there's somebody who just decides they want to hurt you, you can usually get most things fixed.
Mm-hmm.
If Facebook, you can say, this person's never been a client of mine, then Facebook will remove it. You may have to tell them about 15 times, and then they can go back and they can add it under a different name. Then you have to say, hey, Facebook, this person's never been a client of mine, and you can get it removed. But it's difficult. It's painful. It uses up a lot of time. That's also true of Google Plus. If you contact the right people and say, this person's never been a client of mine. As an attorney, I sue people. And so we had a suit against a person, and that person as a defendant, who we got a sizable defamation win against, went around doing this. And so we had to go fix this and say, no, this person is a defendant. And so the authorities behind, the decision makers in those organizations understand, okay, he's an attorney, he sues people. This person is not a client. This person's going to be a person that got sued because they did bad things. So you get that fixed, but quite often you can't.
Right, and somebody in my position, I wouldn't know what to do. I'm sure later in the show you're going to talk about the legal aspects and how I could better navigate that. But people in my position, I don't know how to do that. I wouldn't know who to contact, and even if I knew, can I afford to give up billable hours? That will cost me thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to correct something that I don't believe I should have to correct on my own.
Right, and there's I don't like the European right to be forgotten thing, the way it's currently being put together. But there is something to this idea that says, look, you're saying this about me, and you're far away. You don't know who I am. You know, we've had as a known right winger, so to speak, and you might get this as a known left winger. You know, where somebody will say, "This person's a racist." I go, dude, you live in Chicago. You know, you've never used my services. You don't.
Right.
You know who I am.
You know nothing about me.
Decided,
and you would not presume to come get in my face and tell me this. But you can do it from the anonymity of the internet.
That's right. That's right. Because I've posted something against affirmative action, you've decided that I'm racist, and I secretly use the N-word, and I secretly, this is all horrible. So, no, you can't say that about me. That's difficult.
It's very difficult.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk more about a couple of specific cases where these kinds of things have happened, and we'll see from start to finish what happened. So, be right back.
Whoa, hang on to your hat, folks. More with Warren Nord when we get back. Y'all are back here listening to the White Hat Law Show. Warren, who do we have up next?
Well, thanks for coming back. Wes is going to tell us his story. Wes, tell us what happened to you. Whenever
I will share my sordid tale, bearing in mind that because of the nature of the people involved, I can't give all of the details.
Right.
But the timeline is I had witnessed something that happened at a state-funded institution that I did not feel was appropriate regarding hiring practices. And I made a post on my personal Facebook, not my professional, my personal, important distinction there. And it got forwarded by somebody to an entire group of people without my permission, without my knowledge, because I didn't understand private versus public settings for things I posted on my wall at that time. I have since been very well educated on privacy with Facebook.
Now, how long ago was that?
This was 4 years ago.
Okay.
And it got forwarded, and then it got to the person who the person thought it was about.
Right.
And things got really, really ugly, and lawyers from this state-funded institution got involved, and several of us had to retain counsel ourselves. Mine was the most expensive because since I was the one who posted the original post,
right,
I had to defend myself against a defamation claim.
Now, was it actually a lawsuit that was filed?
We were trying to avoid it getting to the lawsuit stage. At that point, it was still all of the attorneys talking and letters going back and forth and lots of threats of legal action. But when you're getting threats of legal action from state agencies, that's a really scary thing for most of us. That would be very intimidating.
They appear to have infinite money.
They very well have a lot more money to play with this than I do, whether it's infinite or not.
Yeah.
Yes, effectively, they have infinite resources, and they can draw this out for long periods of time. And so I had to retain counsel. And because it was a personal claim and not a professional claim, my malpractice wouldn't cover it, so I had to pay it out of pocket. And I like working with attorneys. I work with attorneys in private practice a lot, but wow, you guys are expensive. Now, don't get me wrong. The result was great.
Worth every penny.
Worth every penny. I completely agree with that. When you find
Some
yourself,
of us are.
When you find yourself in a situation like this, call an attorney. Absolutely. Warren is a good one. But it cost me tens of thousands of dollars to defend myself. Yeah, because ultimately, I had a $650 an hour lawyer, and I think we ended up doing 62 hours total.
Just for the record, I am not $650 an hour. I can aspire to that, though. So if you want to pay that, that's fine.
And just for the record, using a named partner in a law firm does not always get you the best outcome just because you pay the most money. But it was horribly, horribly expensive. And in the process, I ended up having to defend myself because they didn't scrutinize just the one thing I posted. They go back and scrutinize everything I've ever posted.
Right.
Everything I've ever posted on Facebook, Instagram. They looked at emails that I had sent to various people. The discovery process can be overwhelming, the things that they start looking at even before a suit is filed, the information that they want. And it's unbelievably scary for just a private citizen with no legal background.
Right. Well, and whenever we have a lawsuit or investigating a lawsuit, you look at everything, right? And some people would call this a fishing expedition, which you're not supposed to do. But if it's arguably related to or could lead to relevant evidence, That's kind of like 2 steps removed from the actual thing, right?
Seemed to me to be a pretty big scope
it's a
of what
pretty
you
big.
could start asking
And people
for.
can fight about this, but then you have to say, well, do I want to fight about this or just give it to them?
Right, because the more I fight, the more billable hours I'm having to pay this expensive
So
attorney.
do I want to lose here or do I want to lose there?
Right.
So it can be difficult.
But ultimately, I felt like I was defending myself on multiple fronts, not just about this one post that was the claim, but then you get attacked by other people, and your reputation is dragged through the mud, and then you start thinking about, well, what is the ultimate cost of that when my name is out there attached to this, and nobody's supposed to know about it, but because there's no gag order, nothing's actually been filed in court yet. This is just the investigation process. People can post whatever they want, and they did.
Yeah, gag orders are something that usually in the civil world we just don't have. Usually, I mean, you'll often have attorneys that will say, "Look, we don't need to hurt anybody else's reputation just by talking about it. So we're going to keep this as we'll have a Rule 11 agreement or a protective order that says we don't talk about these things outside of litigation." But it's pretty common for that not to happen.
Right.
And if somebody wants to not have that happen, it's hard to keep things actually secret. The default rule is everything is public.
Right.
So it's one of the major kind of foundational problems with a defamation case is somebody has said a horrible thing about me. So in order to get redress for that, I have to go repeat what the horrible thing was that was said about me, and I have to put it in a legal writing, and so it's horrible.
It becomes searchable by everybody. And ultimately, with my timeline, I was found to have done nothing wrong. There was nothing actionable against me. They could not prove that there was any damage based on what I had said because they could not monetize any damage because as their revenue kept climbing and climbing and climbing, how do you document any damage?
Right.
And so ultimately, there was no wrongdoing on my part. But that didn't feel much better after I had to go through a year and a half of this, having to be deposed, having to be interviewed outside of a deposition, having to write hundreds of pages of timelines of events, having to review all the stuff that was said about me, having to pay massive amounts of money. I mean, for a private citizen, when you're talking something crossing $50,000 to defend yourself, that's a heck of a lot of money.
It is crazy money.
It's crazy money. And that took a toll on me. And I think sometimes when you're defending yourself against something, even when you're completely in the right, there is a huge psychological toll that you take in defending yourself. And then what do you do after that? Do I turn around and sue them? Do I want to invest potentially the same amount of money or more to sue them to potentially get nothing out of it?
So you can say, see, I've proved that I did nothing wrong, and it took 50 grand to do that, and I may or may not see that money.
Right.
Just so everybody knows, okay, this is in the American system, generally speaking, there are no attorney's fees for the other side just because you win. Okay, there are no attorney's fees. Now, there are exceptions, and we all like the exceptions, right, because we can get fees from the other side. There's nothing more glorious for a client when you can say, no, the other side's going to pay the fees on this. And we talk about this a lot. But unless there's a contract or unless there's a specific reason why you're going to get fees, you are not going to get fees when you sue somebody. So defamation, the courts are split on this sometimes. I have sued people for defamation and gotten awards for attorney's fees as damages.
Right.
Because I say we incurred attorney's fees to repair the defamation against that you caused, right? And so you can get fees as damages. But if you're defending, you don't necessarily get that.
Your options are somewhere between slim and none, and slim, he done left town. So that's where I was at. So talking to 2 other firms, they all said the same thing. There's really no point going after this. You'll just be throwing, good money after bad. Don't do it. Now you need to focus on improving your reputation.
Right.
Which I never would have thought I needed to improve my reputation and credibility.
Well, it's funny too because there, again, for services, small business services of people, we have a lot of these problems, and it's very common for people to kind of break the rules. You're not supposed to say, "Can you go to this site and review me?" I think that's technically against all the rules of all the review sites. But it's pretty common to say, if you get a hankering and you want to tell other people about what a great job we're doing, please do. And you can go to Facebook and you kind of I do watch there's Facebook and then there's Google Plus and there's Yelp and so we'll say, okay, well, we haven't had one on Yelp recently, so you might say, are you a Yelp user? You might want to visit them and let them know about us.
Yeah.
you're skirting the rules about that kind
Right.
of thing.
I notice in places that I go to, because I'm crazy about food trucks. I love food trucks, and we're having this great food truck renaissance in DFW right now. Thank you, Austin, for shipping it our way. And you go to the food trucks, and they have their social media things posted right there, and they don't specifically say, "Hey, review us," but they say, "We are found on," and they'll list Yelp
Right.
and Google Plus, and you look at these, and there are a lot of great reviews. And in my mind, after what I went through, I'm thinking, no way would I put that out there like that.
Well, there's a yin and a yang,
Right.
And so you're playing games, and so inevitably, you'll have a client who loves you and says, "Well, I love him. He's a great guy. I want to go give him a 4-star review." No, no, I need fives.
Right.
Anything less than a 5 is no good.
Right.
Now, when I've got 1,000 reviews and somebody wants to give me a 4 and they think they're doing a great job for me, I can survive with that. But it's that people will make decisions based on that. So if you've got 5 reviews total and somebody's giving you a 3 and they think they're doing you a favor because they say, "Well, I don't ever give anybody a 4 or a 5. Please don't do me any favors.
Right.
Just go review someplace else."
Right. This is one of those times where regression to the mean, that average score is not a good thing.
No.
I've read something, you might know about this. I read it last week on CNN's website about Yelp reviews and trying to clean them up. That there are companies in other countries that intentionally post negative reviews and that you can't get it cleaned up.
We do a lot of this kind of work, and we had a client who. We don't know if there's actually a person involved or not, but it's contacted by an organization that has a host that's hosted in another country, and it was a very negative review on this foreign server land, and so the review said things were factually not possible for this service provider who did health work, and they just didn't do work the way this review read. It was clearly, in our view, it's clearly falsified. There was no actual client that did this. So this organization contacted me and said, "What can you do?" And so I contacted them. And then right about that time, he gets another email from another organization in the same city, maybe even from the same street, maybe even from the same suite or nearby suite, I don't know. Saying, "We can fix this for you. It only costs you $500. And so my client's outraged, and so it's pretty clearly a scam, right? I have done a bad thing to you, and I'm willing to stop doing a bad thing to you if you will only hand me $500. And so, and they guaranteed they could do this. I can very rarely guarantee anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the real world, we can't guarantee anything.
Yeah,
so what we've got here is social media extortion.
Right, that's exactly right. And so we wound up, I berated them and I said, "Well, we can sue you and we can make you look bad." And eventually they just kind of relented, and it went very high in the SEO. If you contacted their name, it popped right up. They know how to do this stuff.
Right.
It doesn't last long though, right? And so we did what we could do, and we mitigated the damage. But there's a federal law that the United States has that kind of protects all of the content providers. If you want to sue Facebook over this, good luck. That's not going to be easy. But you can sue the individuals, and we've had a case just recently that where a city council person had done something wrong, and people had posted about it. They had posted. When lay people talk about other people breaking the law, you can get sued for various things, right? You can say this person's a bad person all day long, and that's not actionable.
Right.
And when we say the word actionable, we mean we can't sue somebody and win. But if you say, this person stole a thing, well, that's a crime.
Right.
You can sue somebody. That's called defamation per se. I don't have to show damages. I can just sue you and win. It's damages as presumed. And that's good stuff. We like that. As an attorney, I like that. Come to me with those cases. But if somebody says this person lies, it's defamation. It damages the reputation. But did you lose any money? Now I've got to show damages, right? And so this person who's on the city council in this city that's local had done something that was wrong. He was on deferred adjudication. Somebody else said he had been convicted. Convicted is more than deferred adjudication.
Right.
So this city council person sued these 3 people for defamation. This is all on Facebook. This all happened on Facebook. And so Then you get into the anti-SLAPP problem. Probably more than one case. We're going to go and talk about it anyway. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. And so we have a law in Texas, an anti-SLAPP law, and it's designed to say if a developer is coming into your city and is going to put a bunch of strip clubs next to your house, and you start all your household neighborhoods, you get together and you say, we want to stop this. You start a petition, and then he sues you for defamation. Well, that's what the anti-SLAPP law is designed for. It's to stop that kind of thing. And it's to stop this kind of thing too. So a sitting city council member sues you for defamation because you said something bad about him. You can move to dismiss with an anti-SLAPP motion to dismiss. And there are different rules because if you are on city council, you're a public person.
Right, I was just thinking that, but there's so many things that we as lay people would never know, like anti-SLAPP and public person,
right,
and truth is a defense. So I'm sure when we hit the legal side of that, you're really going to inform us about why we need to bring in a professional like you.
Right, because, okay, so people say bad things about, let's say, Donald Trump all the time, or any politician, any person who's a public person. You have to know you're lying for the public person to successfully sue you. So in this case that I'm talking about, the people who were talking were lay people, and they didn't know the difference between deferred adjudication and convicted. He pled guilty.
Right.
So to them, he's convicted. Well, no, not really. But they didn't know they were lying. They didn't know they were wrong. So that was not actionable. Now, had this been just their neighbor, my neighbor has been convicted. Well, Joe Neighbor is not a public person.
Right.
So if you want to say this person's broken the law, and then you're going to have to show you're right. So the burden of proof shifts depending on whether the person is public or not. But none of that, the problem here is that these kinds of things happen on Facebook. Right. And so it all happened on Facebook. Somebody posted a video. The video is not defamatory, or at least it wasn't actionable. But the intro that somebody else used to post it was defamatory and actionable to a degree. So these things get very nuanced very quickly. And you have to be careful. We have one more story that happened to us, and we'll get back to that. We'll come back and we'll take a break for a second. We'll come back and I'll tell the story, then we'll talk about what to do when you are defamed online. We'll be right back.
Whoa, hang on to your hat, folks. More with Warren Nord when we get back. Y'all are back here listening to the White Hat Law Show. Warren, who do we have up next?
Welcome back. I promised a story, and we're going to get to that in a minute, but we have a psychotherapist on here, and so to talk about this defamation issue. Tell us what happens, what price are we paying, both individually and as a society, for these kinds of actions?
Well, it's a huge price, and it's not always just because defamation is the end result. You think about social media, you think about all of the things, we're all on social media. I mean, people are watching this because they're on social media. When you look at the things that are in your newsfeed and you're looking at what's happening in the lives of the people around you, you have to remember that this is a very carefully curated picture that they're giving you. They're giving you a window into their life that they want you to see. They're presenting it a very, very specific way. And sometimes it can look very, very glamorous, like certain reality show stars, and we follow all of that. But sometimes it can also be very negative. A lot of people use social media as a way to really stir up drama, sometimes under the guise of political activism, which can be very useful, but sometimes it really is just to stir a pot, because this is their bully pulpit.
Right.
No matter whether it's positive or negative, it's a very carefully curated view. And it's really easy for us as individuals to internalize that and compare our lives to what we are seeing in this carefully curated picture. And it doesn't leave us feeling good most of the time. You think about when you're toiling away, working on a legal case, or I'm writing notes, and we see Instagram things pop up of our friends on this fantastic, Monte Carlo vacation. We think, wow, why isn't that me? Or shopping sprees, or going to a Broadway show, or whatever. That does not leave us feeling good. The same thing is true for the negative effects. When we see people posting about all these negative attacks on other people, whether it's private citizens or public figures, we don't feel really good, and sometimes that affects our psychology to the point that we feel like we have to get involved, or we feel like we have to step away from this because it's too damaging to be a part of this, to even serve witness to this. It can actually be a vicarious trauma to watch all of this unfold on social media, especially when it's people we love, people we care about. Because naturally we want to come to their defense. It's human nature, but it takes a toll. And you just can extrapolate that further and further out from the individual level to the group level to the societal level and look at what is happening. Look at the polarization that we see on social media that often starts with simple statements. And sometimes they do very quickly escalate to, you are defaming me, this is libel, this is slander, I'm going to get an attorney.
Right.
And it takes a massive toll on us.
Well, you can see sometimes very old people that are just learning how to use social media, and they'll say something just way over the top,
Right.
and you go, "Look, buddy, and it takes time to learn." And
Right.
so
when you have to call up your mother and say, "Mom,
you
I
can't
love you,
say
but you
this.
can't post that on the internet."
And then sometimes people will, you have to. I'm not a super fan of Snopes because they've got that leftist bent, but.
Well, it's what happens when you're right more than you're wrong. But that's okay.
But you can. They're perfectly good for a first run at something,
Right.
and so I have to tell people, tell your aunt and your uncle, before you send this out to your friends, just look it up
Right.
and see if this is remotely true.
Right.
And because sometimes it's a germ of truth, sometimes it's not, and so, but there's several, I think, levels of. It's almost like, do you have a PhD in social media?
Right, you almost have to, and especially because so much of this, I think part of what can be so insidious about this is the anonymity the internet provides. Because I don't have to do any of this under my real name or real profile. You can't always link this back to a real person. And a lot of these things aren't even happening on such public spheres as Facebook. Look at the things that we're doing through Snapchat and Marco Polo and some of those apps where things can disappear. You can say something defamatory and then it disappears. Well, 100 people have seen it. What do you do then?
There's true story. I have a number of cases I call the mean girl cases, and so these are real live cases that actually happened. Cheerleader has an issue, and then somebody who's emotionally distraught due to this issue, and these are not children, but they really are children. They're mid-teenagers, right? They're not out of high school yet, and so they do a Snapchat and they use harsh language, because they're upset. Well, and it goes out to the school and it replicates through the school, and this person is suddenly a racist who hates everybody, and this person is going to be tossed out of school because schools have this policy, and I'll just do a 30-second rant here. What they have is a 30-page book on how to handle behavior problems, and it reminds me of the old saying, the military saying that you measure with a micrometer, you mark with chalk, and you cut with an axe. And all that to say
I'm sure an engineer loves that.
Well, of course, what they're saying is we have this long, exhaustive set of things we can do.
Right.
And so we can really nuance our punishment to the crime. But in reality, it's always 2 weeks at the nearest alternative high school. It's just always that. 10 days or 2 weeks, we're going to toss you out of everything. We're going to ruin your high school career over a Snapchat you did.
That you posted from your home, off of school property, off of school time.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there's a lot of issues involved here.
But you don't have a right to be on the cheer squad.
Right.
Right. And so we have these rules. And so I have case after case of this. This person told on me for wearing the wrong clothing, and therefore this person is a narc. The narc sues. Is it really defamatory to say that I enforce the rules? I don't know. And so these things go on and on.
Yeah, and it's amazing how a 3-second Snapchat can turn somebody, not just high school age, but adult age working professionals, into a social pariah.
Absolutely.
In their circle in ways that can take you years to rebuild your character.
I think we need to have kind of a yearly mulligan. So
Right.
I just want to do that one over. Can we just stop this? I didn't really mean that. I was distraught because of something. And so once this person, we had some work to do there. And once this person came out and said, look, this had just happened. And when everybody sees the full context, they go, the person shouldn't have said what he said. But many humans, it's this human problem.
Right.
we in the Christian world call this original sin and some things like that. You know, whatever you think you want to do, but it's being human.
It is.
And humans are not altogether rational.
No,
So-
and which is why I think one of the things I absolutely stand by 100%. Whenever anything happens that I think should not happen, my first response now is not to type a reply. My first thing sometimes is pick up a phone and call another professional and get some guidance on how do we navigate through this. And now I will tell you from my own experience, it's going to be a lawyer when I think it might be a defamation issue. So I think it's important for people to know that we can't be expected to walk through all the subtle nuances of this in a way that you can. You're trained in this. You went to school to do this. You keep up with this. You represent people who do this. You understand this far better than we do. But at what point do we need to enlist you, I guess would be a question I would have.
I would say that the initial consultation is cheap and easy, and will often the answer will be, I just let this go. Because the biggest problem, and this is ongoing, and I'll tell my own story in just a minute, but you've been defamed. Let's say you've legitimately been defamed. Somebody said something bad about you that's not true. You can prove it's not true. You are in the right all day long. Do you want to file a lawsuit and talk about it some more? Maybe not.
Traumatize yourself more,
Right.
have it more in the public eye.
You know, so there is a saying in the law that not every wrong has redress, and there's not a remedy for every wrong. In this case, there is a remedy, but the remedy hurts you.
Right. Sometimes that remedy sucks.
Yeah, the remedy is not altogether what you'd like for it to be. So just like when somebody goes, you know, you're in a crowded area, somebody comes past you and they hit your shoulder hard, you drop your packages. That doesn't mean you sue them. You know, it just sucks. And sometimes you drop something, you know, your shake, and your shake is all over the sidewalk. You know, you're just going to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? And so that's just what you have to do. This is a true story, and I want to get to this before you end. I'm a lawyer, right? We sue people. I sued, and this was a personal services organization that came to me and said, we've got a client, or not a client, we have an employee who used to work for somebody else. Previous employer hates us because we're employing this employee, and it's created an entire website that parodies us. And it wasn't a parody, because parody is actually okay, but it makes it look like you're visiting our website. But she said a lot of horrible, bad things about us.
Oh, wow.
Had the same background, had the same font.
So they really invested a lot of time in
this person, I later found out that this person was I'll just say an East Bloc immigrant who had come over to get married and was now divorced and had time on her hands.
Sounds a little pathological.
It gets worse and worse as we go along. So this was stage one, right? And so I sent this person a demand letter on behalf of this organization. Said, look, you may hate this employee. That has nothing to do with the employer. Stop doing this. Literally, this person took my pleading, put a stamp, a watermark of somebody flipping somebody off, and posted it on what I'm going to call a ninja website. So now this is going after me too. And she created a website for NORAD Law that was a separate website. And so suddenly I'm involved, right? So she's defaming me. And so I had to assign my claims to my client and continue on. We eventually got this $40,000 defamation suit against this person. We got the award. But we were really concerned, what would this person has no money. So you can't really tell her to do anything. You're just going to get you're just going to get a piece of paper that says this person owes me money forever. And eventually we got it to the point where we got all of and she posted negative reviews of NORAD Law on all these places. And so I had to go around, I guess I'm going to learn how to do this. This was the first big case that I handled like this. And so we learned how to do that. But it's a mess. It's a mess. And you can deal with the problem of somebody who doesn't have a Facebook page for their business, right? Well, if you don't have a Facebook page for your business, somebody else can create one for you.
Right.
And that may not say things you want them to say. And so you have to get a hold of these things, you have to go establish your trademark. You have to go contact Facebook and get all this stuff taken care of. So it can be a mess.
So I'm assuming as a layperson, these are all things I could use you for to establish all of this.
Absolutely.
I mean, your firm can handle all of this for me,
Absolutely.
right?
One of our ongoing things is we are so much cheaper on the front end than the back end. So what we'd always tell people is just come see us. The initial consultation is cheap, right? And so it's worth it. Just talk to somebody about this before you respond with a 3-page letter on your own Facebook page defaming everybody that's associated. And this person's mother is horrible too. Don't do that. Nice. Don't do that. Take the 3 deep breaths you're always told to take. Count to 10. If you want to write it out in Word first, write it out in Word. And say, do I really want to send this? Maybe I should talk to somebody first.
Absolutely.
So social media is a thing. It's social media defamation. Don't do this alone. Find a friend, presumably one that's licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction. We're here in Texas, and I have to say this every once in a while, this is not legal advice, even though I've just been talking about what might be considered legal advice. These are mostly just stories. Your results may differ. Your situation may differ. Come talk to us if you have a question. And thanks for joining us today on White Hat Law.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and we want to thank you for listening to the White Hat Law Show here with Warren Norrid. To find out more about Warren, check him out at norridlaw.com. See you next time.